Samantha Carter was blindsided and humiliated when her boss, Richard Hargrove, fired her simply because of her race, crushing years of dedication and hard work. Richard's arrogance and insecurity blinded him to her talent, making his actions all the more outrageous and unfair. But fate had a twist. Unbeknownst to him, Samantha was the wife of the company's new controlling partner, giving her the power to reclaim her position and restore justice. And just wait until you see how the tables turned on Richard, and why Samantha's triumph became a moment of complete and satisfying justice. Samantha Carter had always believed in earning her place through hard work, dedication, and an unwavering commitment to excellence. As a marketing executive at Blackridge Media, she had poured years of her life into crafting campaigns, strategizing product launches, and mentoring junior employees. The company wasn't just her job, it was a part of her identity. She had stayed late into the night when deadlines loomed, sacrificed weekends for client presentations, and weathered office politics with a determination few could match. Samantha prided herself on being both sharp and meticulous, someone who could anticipate trends and craft strategies that propelled the company forward. But despite her record of success and the respect she had earned from colleagues, Samantha had long sensed an undercurrent of prejudice from her boss, Richard Hargrove. On the surface, he appeared professional, even charming when addressing the board or clients. But behind closed doors, Samantha had felt his dismissive tone, the microaggressions that undermined her accomplishments, and the subtle but unmistakable doubt in his eyes whenever she presented her ideas. It was a pattern she had tried to ignore, rationalizing it as generational differences or personality clashes. Yet deep down, she knew the truth. Richard saw her through the lens of her skin before her talent. That Tuesday morning began like any other, with the buzz of phones, the faint aroma of coffee drifting from the break room, and the soft hum of computers. Samantha was reviewing a new social media campaign when her phone buzzed with a calendar reminder, "Meeting with Richard, 10 a.m." She assumed it was routine, perhaps a discussion of her latest project, but the tone in his email had been unusually curt, lacking the usual pleasantries. Her stomach sank slightly, a quiet instinct whispering that this was different. When she stepped into Richard's office, she immediately noticed the sharp crease in his brow and the tightness in his jaw. The walls, usually lined with framed awards and accolades, felt oppressive in that moment, as though they were closing in around her. Richard gestured toward the chair opposite his desk with a dismissive wave. "Samantha," he began, his voice deceptively calm, "I don't think you fit the image of this company." Time seemed to freeze. Samantha blinked, trying to process the words. At first, she thought she had misheard, that perhaps there was some context she was missing, but the expression on his face left no room for doubt. This was deliberate. Shock surged through her, followed almost instantly by a fiery, righteous anger. She had given her heart and intellect to this work, yet now she was being humiliated, dismissed without explanation, and reduced to a caricature defined by her race. Richard's reasoning was rooted in insecurity and outdated prejudices. He feared a competent black woman outshining him, threatening his authority in front of clients and the board. In his mind, her achievements were not her own, but a potential threat to his ego. He projected his own inadequacies onto her, using bias as a tool to maintain control and reinforce his sense of superiority. But Samantha's anger was not just personal, it was moral. Every slight, every condescending remark she had endured over the years, every subtle undermining, had built to this moment. It was as if the injustice of her dismissal amplified all the small indignities she had endured silently, igniting a fire that refused to be ignored. She realized this was not merely about losing a position. It was about standing up to a system that underestimated her and sought to deny her rightful place. As she stood in the office, the weight of betrayal pressing down on her, Samantha's mind raced. She refused to let this moment define her. The anger that surged through her veins was electric, a signal that she was ready to fight back, not recklessly, but with the full measure of her intelligence, resourcefulness, and resilience. This was no longer just a firing. It was the first spark in a fire that would illuminate truth, justice, and her unshakable strength. The elevator doors closed behind Samantha, cutting off the sterile hum of Blackridge media. As she descended, the weight of what had just happened pressed down on her chest like a physical force. The sting of Richard's words lingered, sharper than any criticism she had ever faced, because this was not about performance or failure. It was a judgment rooted in prejudice, a dismissal of her entire identity. She stepped onto the street, the late morning sunlight failing to warm the icy knot of betrayal lodged deep within her. Samantha walked without purpose, her heels clicking against the concrete in a rhythm that mirrored the turmoil in her mind. The city buzzed around her, oblivious to the injustice she had just endured, and in that oblivion, her pain felt amplified. She thought about the years she had poured into the company, years of strategy sessions, client dinners, and late nights perfecting campaigns that had directly contributed to Blackridge's growth. All of it, gone in a single dismissive sentence. The recognition she had earned, the respect of her colleagues, the pride she carried in her work, all stripped away by someone who could not see beyond his own biases. Her friends and family tried to offer comfort. Messages of support appeared on her phone, texts, calls, emails. "You're talented, Samantha. This isn't the end for you," they wrote. But the words felt distant, incapable of filling the void left by betrayal. Sympathy, no matter how well-intentioned, could not undo the humiliation she had endured or the sense of vulnerability that now shadowed her steps. Samantha's pain was more than just professional. It was existential. It questioned the very framework of fairness and merit she had always believed in. The system she trusted, the one that promised opportunity for those who worked hard, had failed her spectacularly. Worse, Richard had underestimated her, not only as an employee, but as a person of influence and vision. In dismissing her, he had revealed the fragility of his own ego and the shallow perspective through which he viewed the world. Samantha felt the dual edge of this realization, the despair of being misjudged, coupled with the quiet knowledge that his arrogance would be his undoing. Yet in this storm of humiliation, a spark began to kindle within her, a spark that refused to be extinguished. Samantha found herself sitting on a park bench, the hum of the city around her providing a strange kind of solace. She allowed herself to feel the pain fully, to confront the emotional impact of the dismissal. She remembered the subtle slights, the offhand comments, the moments where her ideas were quietly dismissed in meetings. Each memory stung, yet collectively, they began to form a clearer picture. This was not the end of her journey, but the catalyst for a new one. The injustice that had brought her low also illuminated her strength. In the quiet of her reflection, Samantha's resolve began to crystallize. She would not fade quietly into obscurity. The pain, rather than breaking her, sharpened her focus. Every injustice she had endured became a measure of her endurance, every slight a testament to her capacity to rise above it. If Richard had intended to diminish her spirit, he had miscalculated. He had created an opening for her to redefine the narrative, to assert her worth in a way he could not control or diminish. Samantha rose from the bench, the knot of despair in her chest loosening just enough to allow determination to take root. She began to sketch the first outlines of her next move, not as an act of vengeance, but as a reclamation of her dignity, her career, and her sense of justice. Each step she took through the city streets was heavier with purpose than before. The pain lingered, raw and undeniable, yet it no longer paralyzed her. Instead, it became fuel, an unrelenting reminder that she was not defined by the prejudices of others, but by the courage and intelligence with which she faced the world. By the time Samantha returned to her apartment, a quiet fire burned within her. The road ahead would not be easy, but for the first time she saw a possibility in the ashes of betrayal. Pain had tested her, yes, but it had also made her stronger, sharper, and more determined than ever to reclaim what was rightfully hers. Richard may have thought he had won, but Samantha knew the truth. The game was far from over, and the next move was hers. Weeks passed after that crushing morning at Black Ridge Media, and Samantha's life had settled into a rhythm of quiet reflection. She spent her days reassessing her options, networking discreetly, and rebuilding the confidence that had been shaken by Richard's unjust dismissal. Yet, beneath her careful composure, a faint ember of hope had begun to glow, small, fragile, but persistent. It came in the form of a surprising revelation that arrived one evening as she returned from a consulting meeting. Michael, her husband, had made a move she hadn't anticipated. While she had been navigating the aftermath of her firing, he had quietly acquired a controlling stake in Black Ridge Media. Samantha had been unaware of the timing, never imagining that the company that had rejected her would soon fall under the influence of someone she trusted implicitly. The news struck her with a mixture of disbelief and cautious exhilaration. Legally, she was now connected to the very institution that had sought to diminish her, not merely as a spouse, but as a partner in ownership. The tables, it seemed, were about to turn. The implications were immediate and profound. Richard, who continued his pattern of arrogance and condescension in the office, remained oblivious to the new power dynamics. He strutted through the hallways, congratulating himself on deals and strategies, completely unaware that the woman he had humiliated now held an unspoken authority over him. Samantha realized that his ignorance was both a vulnerability and an opportunity. This was her moment to act, to transform the humiliation she had endured into leverage, not through anger or rash retaliation, but through strategy, insight, and patience. That night, Samantha and Michael sat across from each other in the quiet of their home office, papers and financial statements spread between them. The dim light reflected off the polished wood of the desk as she laid out her thoughts. "Michael, I want to reclaim not just my position, but integrity for the company. Richard's behavior has gone unchecked for too long," she said, her voice steady, carrying a calm authority that made him nod in agreement. Together, they began to craft a plan, one that balanced accountability with fairness, ensuring that Samantha could step back into the company not as a reaction to anger, but as a restoration of rightful leadership. Samantha's mind worked like a finely tuned engine. She considered every possible outcome, how Richard might react, how the employees would respond, and how best to communicate the shift without creating unnecessary conflict. Her hope surged as she recognized the magnitude of the opportunity before her. The company that had once been a site of humiliation could now become a stage for justice, a place where talent, not bias, would be recognized and rewarded. Her heart lifted with the realization that she was not powerless. The very institution that had sought to dismiss her could now witness her strength and intellect in full measure. Over the following days, Samantha quietly reacquainted herself with the internal workings of Blackridge Media. She spoke with department heads, reviewed ongoing campaigns, and gathered insights about how to make the transition smooth but impactful. Each conversation, each observation, further reinforced her confidence. The humiliation she had endured was no longer a shackle. It was the catalyst for a more deliberate strategic return. She envisioned a moment when Richard would be confronted with undeniable truth, not in a way that embarrassed him for its own sake, but in a way that illuminated fairness, competence, and accountability. By the time Samantha was ready to present her plan to Michael formally, a profound sense of calm determination had replaced the lingering pain. She no longer felt like a victim. She felt like a strategist, a leader, a woman whose intellect and moral clarity could transform injustice into opportunity. The spark of hope that had flickered faintly weeks before now blazed into a steady flame. Samantha knew the stage was set. The right moment, the right approach, and the right combination of courage and composure would allow her to step forward, not only to reclaim what she had lost, but also to ensure that justice prevailed. Hope had taken root, and with it came a renewed sense of purpose. The next chapter of her story was about to unfold, and this time she would be in control. The day Samantha had been anticipating arrived with an almost electric tension in the air. The boardroom at Blackridge Media, usually a space for quarterly reports and strategic discussions, now carried the weight of history in the making. Samantha walked in with measured confidence, her posture upright, her mind focused, her eyes scanning the room with quiet authority. The employees noticed immediately that something had changed, not just in her, but in the very energy she brought with her. Where there had once been hesitation and uncertainty, there was now a calm decisiveness that demanded attention. Michael, her husband and now controlling partner, took his place at the head of the table. Richard Hargrove, unaware of the full truth, sat with his usual smugness, prepared to preside over a routine meeting. He had no idea that the dynamics were about to shift irrevocably. "Ladies and gentlemen," Michael began, his voice carrying clearly across the polished boardroom, "I want to introduce someone very important to the future of Blackridge Media. My wife, Samantha Carter. She will be joining the company as our Chief Marketing Officer." The room went silent. Richard's face, previously composed with an air of superiority, visibly drained of color. His eyes widened, and his mouth opened slightly in disbelief. For years, he had carried himself as the arbiter of talent, the decision-maker whose approval determined the fates of employees. And now, the woman he had dismissed, humiliated, and underestimated had stepped into a role of undeniable authority over him. He attempted to speak, to defend himself, but the words faltered, leaving him exposed in front of the entire company. Every excuse he could have mustered crumbled under the weight of the truth. Samantha's victory was more than personal. It was moral, symbolic, and transformative. In that moment, she demonstrated that integrity, patience, and strategic intelligence could convert the harshest injustice into an opportunity for systemic change. She did not need to shout or berate. Her presence and the undeniable authority she now wielded spoke louder than any confrontation could. Employees who had witnessed her firing years ago felt a wave of vindication and pride. They saw not only the return of a talented leader, but the reassertion of fairness and justice in the workplace. As Samantha took her seat at the head of the table alongside Michael, she began outlining her vision for Blackridge Media, a vision centered on equality, respect, and collaboration. Her plan addressed long-overlooked biases in the company, initiatives to elevate underrepresented voices, and strategies to ensure that talent and performance, rather than prejudice or favoritism, determined advancement. The room, which had often been filled with quiet skepticism, now buzzed with interest and optimism. The atmosphere at Blackridge had shifted. It was no longer an environment of intimidation, but one of empowerment. Richard, confronted with the reality of his misjudgment, was quietly removed from operational authority soon after. His arrogance had given way to shame, and the legacy of his bias became a cautionary tale within the company. Samantha, meanwhile, flourished in her role. Her career soared, but more importantly, her dignity and self-respect were fully restored. Her leadership was marked not only by skill, but by the moral clarity she had gained through her trials. Samantha's journey became an emblem of resilience and justice. She proved that no act of discrimination or prejudice is insurmountable, and that even those in positions of apparent power can be held accountable when integrity, patience, and courage intersect. Employees, colleagues, and industry peers saw in her a model of strength, a professional who transformed despair into triumph, who reshaped an organization not through retaliation, but through wisdom and fairness. In the weeks and months that followed, Samantha's story circulated widely within corporate circles. She was a reminder that injustice, however painful, could be a catalyst for growth, reform, and inspiration. Blackridge Media thrived under her leadership, not only in performance metrics, but in the culture of respect and inclusion she cultivated. Samantha had reclaimed her career, her voice, and her dignity, leaving a lasting testament. Injustice can be challenged, wrongs can be righted, and strength paired with patience and intellect can transform even the darkest setbacks into the brightest victories.